So a question that I get a lot is, what do you mean by setting up opportunities for him to mand? What is a mand and what is mand training? So mand training is a highly effective method for teaching a child with communication deficits to communicate. A mand is a request or asking for something. Mand training is about teaching an individual or a kid to communicate, not talk. Communication is a lot more than just being able to speak. Communication can be taught through sign language, picture communications like photos, iPads, cell phones, PECs, or other use of assistive devices. So manding is not always have to be vocal. So why teach manding? A child who cannot request their wants or needs often engage in problem behaviors such as tantrum, crying, aggression, property destruction. They often cause their caregivers to play the guess what I need game by asking them, what do you want? Are you sick? Are you hungry? Does something hurt? Because they can't effectively communicate their wants or needs. And they will also struggle with social interaction. So mand training starts off with a real good amount of highly preferred items, or what we call reinforcers. So we really need to know what our client is most interested in. What are their highly preferred items? Because these are the mands that we will want to teach first before we start teaching general nouns or generalized mands such as more, or even before manners such as please, because motivation is the key. So let's say I really like this blue marker. I will do anything for this blue marker. I will work really hard for it. So I will be very motivated by it to mand for marker in order to gain access to my marker. So through manding, the reinforcement the child receives by manding is simply getting what they want. That is the reinforcement. So through this, consistency is key. Mand training can take literally hundreds of trials per target for some kids. So in a typical therapy session, I can incorporate mand training in almost every minute of that therapy session. So for this, things as repetition are extremely important for some kids. And so definitely be prepared when working on mands to work on them throughout the entire session across environments with other caregivers, people, and anything of that nature. So once mand training does begin, you guys, the therapists, should provide multiple opportunities for the child to mand. Again, we circle back. What is that? How do I set up opportunities for manding? So I have 5 steps for you guys. So the first step is to create motivation by giving the child free access to those items or activities. Watch for smiles, laughing, signs of enjoyment, or what we call a preference assessment. Pause the activity and look for their current way of requesting. Identify their current way of requesting for more of that item, either by reaching, pointing, giving you that item, whatever it is. So at first, you will start reinforcing that behavior by giving them that item. So for example, if they hand you the wand of bubbles when you paused and put it on the floor, that is their way of saying, hey, blow more bubbles. I want more bubbles. And you can also engage in other activities by yourself and also watch for those signs that they want the item, such as you're sitting on the floor playing with cars. Vroom, vroom, vroom. The child looks over and they're like, that looks like a lot of fun. I really want that car. They go to reach for it. You're going to block it. And the next step is shaping that mand. Their current mand is reaching. So now we're going to block that and teach them that is no longer acceptable. And we're going to shape it into a new form of mand behavior through prompting. So then you're going to prompt him to say car, or to whatever way that they communicate, demand for car. And then once they do that, once they mand for it, you're going to give them some of it. Then you're going to pause again, fade that prompt, If they do it correctly, if they mand correctly, you're going to give them a little more of it if you are able to fade that prompt. And then you're going to continue setting up those opportunities for them to mand for it independently. So you want to give longer durations or more of the item, the more independent the child is at manding for that item correctly. So if the child is able to mand correctly for the item, continue setting up natural opportunities for them to mand for the item. And so I put emphasis on natural opportunities because this is one big one, is avoid taking the item away just for the sole purpose of getting the child to mand. This is not always natural, and we want to focus on situations that the child would encounter throughout their day to teach them to mand through those specific situations, not only when somebody takes something away from you. So it is also important to remember that if the child is not showing interest in that item or activity, do not prompt them to mand for it. Because honestly, that is the exact opposite of manding. This does not teach them effective communication. So give free access, create motivation while watching for signs of that enjoyment for it. Also, labeling items is not always a mand. If the child has bubbles in their hand, they're blowing bubbles, they're drawing with markers, and they say markers, or they're blowing bubbles and they say bubbles. This is not always a mand. They may not be requesting for bubbles or markers if they're just simply labeling it. And so we really have to be careful on deciding by watching them, are they looking at you? Do you have markers in your hands when they're saying marker? Or are they simply just labeling that they have a marker? And you also want to vary the situation. If the child is working on a one-word mand of, let's say, open, you want to vary the situations for that child to mand open, such as opening a bag, opening a door, opening a box, opening your hand, or any other containers, such as Play-Doh containers. You always just make sure that they're appropriate and they make sense, that is actually something to open. Because we want the child to know different situations to actually open something, not that open means I get whatever I want, even if it doesn't make sense. So, for example, let's say we're working on the mand bubbles. So the child doesn't know how to ask for bubbles at this point, but when paused, they grab the bubbles and they hand them back to you in order to say, hey, blow more bubbles, do it again. At first, you will reinforce this behavior to create that is their current way of manding. That is more acceptable than crying when you stop blowing bubbles. So you want to reinforce the handing of it, which is their current way of manding. Then you will shape it into the current mand that you are working on, whether it be exchanging a picture, like through PECs, sign language, verbal, anything that you guys are working on, and then you're going to teach that through prompting. Give them a little bit of the item, pause, fade that prompt until independent through multiple trials. And through this, give longer durations, more of the item as they become more independent. And then there we go. The child is able to mand successfully for those. And then from there on, your senior or your BCBA will instruct you guys in order to either increase what they're asking for from one word mands to two, instead of just bubbles. Now it's blow bubbles, etc. It keeps building from there. But this gives you guys the foundational idea of what mand training and setting up opportunities for that. If you guys have any questions, feel free to send them my way. Otherwise, if you like these videos and want more of them, let me know and I can make more for you. Otherwise, let me know of specific subjects that you want to learn more about and we can go from there. Otherwise, I will see you guys soon.